What is up, squad? I'm BJ Kicks, and welcome to another episode of The Hangout. This is my weekly live stream. We do this every Thursday at 7 p.m. So if you're watching on the replay, I hope you can catch us live next week, or any week, any Thursday at 7. And if you're here live in the chat right now, shout out to you. Go ahead and let me know while we're getting all the intros done. Let me know what you're reading this week, what your favorite book that you picked up was, or if you haven't made it to the shop, what you're most looking forward to this week. I'm not going to get to the shop to get my pull list until possibly Sunday. It's been a busy week. But anyway, I've got a very special guest here with me today. Yeah, the lights are on. I thought keeping the lights on would fix this camera flicker. It's not. I'm just going to buy a new webcam, but I didn't feel like getting up to turn the light back off. So, but anyway, yeah, I got a very special guest. This is a good friend of mine. You know what? I won't even I'll try. I tried the whole intro thing, right? Like, oh, you might know them from this episode of so, but nah. So Laura, I have here from Married with Comics, formerly Brown Coat Reviews. I'm gonna let her tell you a little bit more about herself and her channel. Laura, welcome to the Hangout.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura, obviously from Married with Comics, and technically I got started because of BJ Kicks. So BJ Kicks and I have been friends. We go to the same LCS, so I may see you on Saturday or Sunday. But originally I had reached out to BJ to, see if maybe I could do a couple guest appearances and talk about different series. And BJ was the one who turned around and said, maybe you have enough of a unique perspective and a voice that have you considered doing your own channel? And I think you were also the one who, knew that, of course, Scott was the one who was also reading comic books because you met him at the shop. And I think you were the one who said, have you thought about kind of dragging Scott on camera? So it kind of evolved from there. So on the channel, we do different interviews. We go behind the scenes at different comic book shops, Comic-Cons. We interview authors, writers, and, features and Kickstarters. And then, of course, we have some, fun little DIY projects that I've been doing. So I just did a comic book display, alternative for Gator Guards. And I have an upcoming video about my kind of DIY option versus a Gator Guard. Gator Guard actually sent me some Gator Guards to be able to show, which one is easiest, which one's the best way to showcase whether it's your Silver Age or your modern comics. I'm really excited about that one.
That's dope. So, yeah, Laura and Scott, I remember when Laura started her channel because I ended up doing a little makeshift logo for the channel, and that was cool for a little bit. But then she started this show with Scott called Married with Comics, and I was like, when I saw it, I was like, you should just make the channel that. This is just, it's an angle that no one else has, and you guys know, I'm big on that. I love seeing people do things that other people can't. Trucking Nerd, I can't do what he's about to do, and that's super awesome. So the idea of a married couple reading comics, he's got his pull list, she's got hers. I was like, that's got to be the show. And she was like, I like my name. I was like, I feel you. Here we are. So I'm excited.
It took us a while to kind of decide if we were going to rebrand, and I was like, if we're gonna do it, got to do it now. And when we rebranded, suddenly everyone, not everyone got the Brown Coat Reviews, Firefly reference. And as soon as we rebranded to Married with Comics, everyone got the inside joke, and it was just a ton of fun. And some of the best parts I think about the channel is, you'll still see me, you'll still see individual episodes with Scott. But a lot of the kind of bantering between us as a married couple, because we will have titles that we agree on, and we have plenty of titles that we don't agree on. Right. And yes, we are very constructive about it, and we have fun and kind of tease each other a little bit about it. But there's kind of a welcome discord that happens. It, of course, happens in every married couple where you can agree to disagree and still have fun.
Right. Yeah. One thing I love about your channel, it's just how much you guys are in a constant conversation with the audience. If you go into any of Laura and Scott's videos and just check out the comment section, there are so many people, some of you guys actually, but there's so many people that I see in the comments of every post, and they do a really good job of engaging you guys from week to week. They'll even like read the comments on air, which is something that maybe I should do once in a while. But I do my videos so like in a vacuum that I don't think about it. But that's one of the fun things that I like watching on your channel specifically. Kev says,
I absolutely love having that feedback, and it's part of the reason that we do the reviews, because it's not just for our benefit, and it's not our way to kind of sit up there and preach and say, well, this is what you're going to believe about a specific title. So I love hearing that feedback, even if someone again disagrees with something that I found in the title. Maybe you found something else that you really enjoyed. And I really love that kind of back and forth conversation, because again, sometimes people will point out different things, and sometimes we're all in the same boat and we agree, and we're like, well, have you tried this other recommendation? And it's really fun to kind of hear whether it's recommendations or different titles that everyone's reading. I love that back and forth. But of course, you're doing that here on the Hangout.
Yes, that's part of the reason I do the Hangout, right? Because 6 days a week, it's just me talking at a camera. But the Hangout, I get feedback. I get to talk to people. Somebody can tell me if the audio is weird. I do hear it too. I don't know. Is it your mic, or I thought the mic was off? Or
the mic is off. Am I echoing?
It's not echoing. It almost sounds like the wind is blowing or something.
Hang on, I'll fix that.
Okay.
I know what it is.
Gotcha. Cool. But yeah, so I'll solo myself for a second till she comes back. But yeah, so let's see. He said it sounds a bit like a car. Canada Neo, Nerdo says, I had a few Lamb of God questions, but figure wrong place. Probably. All right, let me get out the solo. She's back.
Surprise.
Nice. And the wind is gone.
Without sound effects.
Cool. So yeah, let's look at the chat. Let's see what's going on. Kev says, good evening, everyone.
Hey.
T-Bone says, thumbs up to BJ Kicks. T-Bone, you won something in a prize pack a while back, right? I remember that name. Born Hitman says, I got my Ultra Mega trade this week. Love the kaiju feel of it. I've never been like the monster guy, like Godzilla, stuff like that, but I know people love kaiju tales. I did read Grendel, Kentucky. I guess that's kind of that. Is it?
Scott loves it. Like but he grew up with Transformers. So as soon as something starts kind of getting Megatron size, he gets super excited.
Word. Yeah, that is what it reminds me of, like Power Rangers at the end.
Yeah.
Comic Book Novice has been catching up the last few weeks. Hasn't read anything from this week yet, but just got around to reading King Spawn #1. It was amazing. Listen.
Yes.
You can see the stacks of comics that I've not quite read yet. King Spawn is in here because I just saw King Spawn #2 is in this stack. King Spawn #1, I think, is over there. I got to get around. I got to read my comics, which is why I stopped doing Wednesday videos, specifically so I can catch up on my reading pile. But
King Spawn is awesome, issue #1, but I'm in the same boat. I haven't read issue #2 yet.
Word. And then issue 3 is supposed to be out this week. I think it got pushed to next week along with Gunslinger, though.
Yeah.
Tom says, hey, BJ and Laura. What's up, Tom?
Hello, Tom. Did you know that Tom's about to start a YouTube channel, too?
Is he? I feel like he told me that, but I don't remember.
It's going to be watercolors. It's going to be beautiful.
That's dope, because I think we all need a replacement for Bob Ross. Some happy little trees here. Jelliet says the same thing that Tom said, which is cool.
Hi, Jelliet.
Jimmy G, the comic guy. What's up?
Hi.
Phil wants to know what shirt you're wearing, Laura.
Oh, it's Black Widow.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Black Widow, baby. Sorry, I don't know if you can see it very well.
I do see it. Oh, yeah. C. Rook is used to be Star Wars fan. He's glad he's able to attend this stream. He deleted his old account, but he's been super swamped lately. Let's see. Ben says, wait, you're supposed to read your comics and not just stack them in the piles? Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Of course, we're 10 minutes in and I haven't talked about what we're going to be talking about today, but you can see from the background, we're doing a live review of Killadelphia Volume 1 by Rodney Barnes and Jason Sean Alexander. I'm really excited about it. Um, this was one of those books that I would not have normally picked up. I got this in my first mainstream mystery box, like long before they were a channel sponsor. I just bought one, and that came in it, Killadelphia #1. I read it, and I was like, yo, this is amazing. And I just blind bought the rest of the series, and it's still on my pull list now. But somehow, until Laura was like, let's do this review, I still hadn't read past issue 2. So I got to read volume 1 specifically for this review, and I'm very, very excited about it. But we'll get back into that later. Star Wars fan, or the artist formerly known as Star Wars fan, says, BJ reading horror. Who are you? What have you done with BJ? It's true. I make it a point to stay away from horror books. And I made an exception for this because of this father-son aspect that we'll get into, I'm sure, in our reviews.
Definitely.
But yeah, so we'll probably keep taking Q&A for at least, 5-10 more minutes. And then we're going to dive into our review because I got a lot of thoughts on this book. Comic Book Novice, of course, is making me feel bad about my mantra.
It doesn't mean you won't read it today, maybe tomorrow, next week.
Right. The point of Read What You Buy was mostly about, like, because people buy stuff and just stack them just to say they got them or to sell them off later. And it becomes this whole different thing. So when I say read what you buy, it's partly like, all right, well, let's not just be spectators in the sport, but really get down into it, right? But also, you can only buy what you like if you read what you buy. And so that's kind of what I aim for. It's like I want to like read every book in my collection, and for a very long time, I was great at it. And the only thing that really messed it up for me was my wife getting pregnant, and then the baby being born, which does come after a pregnancy pretty naturally. So,
but now you have Squeak.
It's true. I do have Squeak, and now it's even crazier because it's like I used to just kind of keep my comics all over the house. Now I keep my comics in this room only because they're subject to like drool, or she's really grabby these days, so she'll grab anything. So now I got to keep everything like locked up in here. But let's see. So the Comic Book Report's got a question. What's the book you've bought but haven't read yet that is the highest on your need to read list? So the book that I'm most excited about reading that I haven't read yet is Something's Killing the Children. I bought volume 1 in trades because I totally missed out on the single issue wave for that book. So I bought volume 1 of the trade. Recently, I read issue 1 of every trade that I have to see, all right, where is this going to rank? Which one do I want to read first? And Something's Killing the Children took the cake. So let's see. Shannon says, you trucking nerd with the super chat. Thank you for the super chat. Says, I love that two of my most favorite YouTubers are talking about a book that is based on my hometown. Hope to collab with you guys in person one day. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
If you end up in Raleigh and I'm free, we're definitely going to meet up. And if I'm not free, just give me enough notice and I'll make myself free. We definitely got to hang out. It's going to be fun. Seth is saying stuff along the same line. Says, very cool to see this team up. Excited to know all you thought about the origin of the vampires in Killadelphia. Yeah, man. Yeah. Really dope. Kev says, if you like the father-son aspect of Killadelphia, you may enjoy the father-daughter dynamic in Witches, which that was your first comic, right?
It was my first Dan recommendation.
Gotcha.
So Dan is the owner and manager over at the Ultimate Comics Raleigh location that Brandon and I, or BJ and I, both go to. And it was the first time that I kind of walked around the shop and said, all right, I want a non-superhero, kick butt female. Give me something interesting that people haven't, recommended before. And he started walking around the shop and he gave me 10 different titles. And one of the first one was Witches. And he said, if you haven't read this, you must. And I read it that night, and it was one of the first times that I'd actually sat there on the couch and couldn't leave the couch because it was that good. And nice. I can't wait to reread that soon.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if the book that got me like hooked on comics was House of X and Powers of 10. And that weekly ride, like the fact that it was a weekly series, like Marvel did everything they needed to do to like get me as a customer. Like the variant covers were dope. The book came out every week. Every issue was super exciting. I liked House more than I liked Power, but I loved both of them anyway. Um, and by the time it was over, I'm like, I've been walking into a comic shop every week for 3 months. Why stop now? Um, so yeah, and I've kind of been chasing that feeling ever since. And there's some stories that have come close, but I don't think anything has matched that yet for me. So, but I love that feeling, like just finding a book and like I can't put this down. It's dope.
Yeah. There've been a couple series since Witches that have, hit that mark, but it sets the bar so high
Yeah,
that I'm like, everything starts comparing to what I'm hoping will be Witches. And it's one of the many reasons I'm a Scott Snyder fan.
word. It's weird that my TV just popped up. I didn't press any buttons.
Hey, speaking of witches, poltergeist going on over there.
The 1 week I decide to read a horror book and talk about it, ghosts take over the Reagan studio.
Which, if any of you have noticed that my camera keeps shifting, it is not poltergeist. I have a dog that has decided to lay down right here, and I'm trying to keep her contained, but she is trying to lay on. Yep, she just did.
Yeah. Before we got this place, you guys would always see my cat Charlotte in my videos. She would pop up on the window behind. She's now not allowed in this room because she likes to jump on my to read pile specifically. But when I would record videos at the old place, she would always like, cats love rubbing up against stuff, and she would always rub up against the tripod, and it was just like, yo, like you're shaking the, can't do this.
Yep.
And let's see. So Ben says, in Witches, when they talks about the feeling as a parent of being scared for the safety of your child, as having an internal organ on the outside of your body, I felt that. Yeah, I got to read this book.
The relationship in that story, I think you're going to appreciate it as a father, especially of daughters. But they build that relationship, and then of course, there's the horror story elements to it and the witch's storyline, but everything kind of boils down to that relationship, and I love it for that.
Word. I'm gonna have to check that out then. Let's see. Oh, yo, Skip does have like every friend in comics. Like, I need your Rolodex. Is a reference that just dates my life. But anyway, Nice Stray Dogs, my buddy colored that book.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that was actually signed by Tony Fleece, great friend of the channel. They waited in line for 4 hours and they got it signed, and it says "For Married with Comics." Absolutely love it.
That is awesome. I don't have a story nearly as cool as that, although Trish did, like, there was 1 week where I was going over my favorite books of the month, and she commented on that video like, thanks for watching or for talking about Stray Dogs. And then Matt did the same, even though, or not Matt, I keep calling him Matt. It's Tony Fleeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I called him Matt in the video, and he's like, it's okay, my brother's name is Matt. So just hilarious. But yeah, I have no signature to commemorate that moment, but it's just a fun thing to know.
Yeah.
Let's see. SSI says, is it a ghost dog?
Well, we actually have jokingly nicknamed her FOMO, because every time you start petting one dog, she has to come on over. So she's definitely the epitome of fear of missing out, which is why she suddenly had to move across the room to be right here.
That's hilarious. Let's see. Doug really felt that parent relationship in Witches as well, which is dope. Let's see. Skip says, I don't know a lot of people, but I'm not too far from them either. Comics is a small world. Got it. And Ben with the recommendation says, for those who liked Witches, check out The Autumnal from Vault Comics. The trade just came out. It's got a very similar feeling.
Definitely. I loved that one.
Word. So I guess, oh wow, this is awesome. My favorite, Skip and Tosh says, my favorite artist is a friend of mine, so I could never meet anyone else and be good. That's dope. That's super dope. Yeah, I will say, like, one cool thing about being a YouTuber is being able to like meet or, you know, become acquainted with creators. I think we've both had that happen at different points, right? Like, you know, people appreciate you talking about the stories that they work so hard on. And it's really cool to be able to talk to them for a second, like, hey, these are real people, and they, it's really dope.
Yes.
Um, so these recommendations are just coming in. May's book by Jeff Lemire hits me in the feels, and it's very dark if you like father-daughter dynamic.
It's on my list.
Word. So yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you before we get into our review of Killadelphia, right? I think what's cool about the comic community is everybody's got different taste. What are some of your favorite reads lately? Like what do you kind of gravitate toward?
So that's a jaded question because right now we're doing the 31 comics of Halloween. So I have been like binge reading Halloween horror titles for the last month, and I've got one more to finish from Hell, Alan Moore, before we post our final video this month. So I've been reading Outcast and The Walking Dead, Lock and Key, which Lock and Key was already one of my favorites. So like my top is definitely Lock and Key, and Witches are always going to stay on the top two. Lady Killer just surprised me to no end. And it was such a fun story, so it kind of always stays at the top. I do have non-indie titles, but of course I cannot think of them at this very second. Enjoy Catwoman. I love a lot of Batman. So the James Tynion IV run of Batman, love his. Scott Snyder's run, The Court of Owls. Nice House on the Lake has been amazing. That one, Noctera. I've got a lot of them that I've just absolutely loved, but the to be read pile, I jump all over the place. And I do it intentionally, not just because it makes for really interesting reviews, but because my taste jumps all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm willing to try anything. So, for instance, someone had challenged me to read a Vampirella comic. And even though that's normally a character that I take a look at her costume and I respond the way every woman does and say, wow, put on some clothes, honey.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still willing to give her a try and see if I like this character. I did the same thing with Red Sonja, and I found the Gail Simone run of Red Sonja was really awesome. So I'm willing to kind of approach anything with an open mind, and there will be times, of course, that I don't care for it, but at least I'm willing to give it a shot.
Got you. Yeah, I tried an issue of Vampirella. It they had the free comic book day issue, which was basically a reprint of Priest's first issue. I didn't get it in my bag from Ultimate, but I ended up just like checking it out on Comixology, and for me, there wasn't enough substance to kind of justify or to like try to get through the attire and the look of it. It was very much like a book for cheesecake fans. So it's like it just isn't going to be for me. And I can appreciate that Priest was certainly trying to like, you could tell he was trying to do something deeper than you're a looker, but it was just like, eh. But there was another book that you mentioned that gives me a great segue to talk about something I forgot to talk about before. So you talked about Lady Killer, Joelle Jones, or is it Yoel Jones?
Joelle.
It's just Joelle? Why does she have the umlaut? Is there a need? Anyway, for Joelle Jones, which we all know her as, but the Lady Killer, there was a Nick and Dent sale at Cheap Graphic Novels yesterday, and I had in my cart Volume 1 or the Lady Killer Library Edition, and I was like, it was only $15, but I was like, okay, I feel like I'm gonna be mad if I get this, I like it, and it's dinged up. So instead of getting the Nick and Dent version from Cheap Graphic Novels, I decided I'm going to head over to our channel sponsor, Organic Price Books, where it is still available brand new for just $30. So if you're looking for any collected editions, then you should check out our channel sponsor, Organic Price Books. They're the best place to look for these collected editions. Trades, omnis, you name it, it's there. Just make sure you pre-order stuff because things go quickly. Like that Something Is Killing the Children slipcase. It's sold out. They're going to reprint more, but for people like me who missed out, we're going to be waiting.
And they do have some artistic short boxes that are available on Organic Price Books. I
Yes,
saw they've got Something is Killing the Children short box that I'm definitely pre-ordering.
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I got the channel sponsor out of the way, and yes, C. Rook, I am haunted by the flickering TV screen. I am in the ring. I'm gonna crawl out like. And he says, out of curiosity, do you use your own discount code? I mix it up. Sometimes I use my code. Sometimes I use codes that my friends give me. It's $2 off either way. And yeah, so sometimes I try to support other people as well. Venom Speech says, what's up, guys?
Hello.
Um, Ben Uncle says, oh man, definitely got to swing to Married with Comics right after this live show to check these titles out. You should do that. Trey Gillis says Year Zero is a good zombie book. That's Ben Percy, right?
I haven't read that one yet, but it's each one of these videos. So we've been doing themes for our 31 comics of Halloween. So we just did a zombies video. More coming, of course. And each video, of course, I keep asking for recommendations. So I will add that to my zombie titles for next year.
Right. Word. So I need to check that out. I don't do a bunch of horror, but I don't mind zombie books. Let's see. Ben Uncle says, "Gotta show Mad Dog some love." Woof woof.
Absolutely.
I can't do the accent, but woof woof to my homie Mad Dog if he's watching. Let's see. It's so good. Yeah, Justin Greenwood did the book with Anthony Johnston. What are we talking about? Are we talking about Wasteland? Got you. Very cool. So yeah, so we've been talking basically about horror books all night, and today we're reviewing Killadelphia, which I'm really excited about. Comic book report, real quick. I have not read Lock and Key.
Oh, you got to. You will love it.
What's it about?
So you have 3 children and their mother who have moved from one side of the country to the other, and they move into the special house that has hidden keys, and each key does something magical. You find out kind of the history of the keys, and then you find out some of the different unique things that the keys will do. So, for instance, one of the first keys they find opens a door, and you become a ghost. So you actually pass away, and your spirit kind of can go all these different places, and then you pass back through the door and you return to life. There's an anywhere key that allows you to step through any door and go anywhere in the world. So you see some of these little interplays where it's almost like Chronicles of Narnia, but then you've got this sinister storyline that's going on at the same time because you have someone else who's trying to find and collect the keys and kind of work against the children. Gotcha. Really interesting. That's one that I had to force myself off the couch because it's so good, incredibly addictive.
Got you. Well, I know they have that the hardcover compendium, which I don't know why they didn't call it an omnibus, but they have it. So maybe I'll order that. Born Hitman has a question for us both before we jump into this review. It says, what made you guys pursue YouTube over other avenues such as a podcast or just like a blog?
It's a good question. I have done blogs in the past, and I find that most people are kind of like me, where I get a little ADD at times. And once you see a review that's 10 paragraphs long, you maybe read the first paragraph, the last paragraph, and you kind of get the gist of did you like it or not. And I find that a lot of times with a real review where you want to see the pictures, you want to get some of the in-depth, artwork, it's really hard to achieve in a blog. Podcasts, some of them are highly successful, and I love a lot of them. But that was another one that I was like, well, which one do I want more? And I felt with comics, because it's such a visual medium, that I really wanted to be showcasing some of the art instead of trying to describe it, because sometimes I get stuck on sometimes the words of describing some of these different art approaches. Like Jock has a very unique style. So how do you explain Jock in a podcast where on YouTube you can just show it? And that's why I chose it.
Yeah, so this isn't my bad. If I'm ever texting during the show, I'm texting my wife, just making sure the baby's good. But anyway, so what was I saying? Oh,
Why?
done other media before, right? Like, so I have a channel where I basically discuss music marketing. But as a part of that whole company, because it's not just the YouTube channel, I run a business where I teach people marketing. And for as a part of that, I've done a podcast where I interview people. I've done YouTube videos, obviously. I think that channel we just crossed 24,000 last week, and then I also do have a blog there. And I think for different purposes, each of those work really well, right? Like Laura was saying, with comics, it is a very visual medium. And so being able to show off the art or really just kind of show through the screen why you're excited about something is just awesome. But then also with YouTube specifically, YouTube is one of those outlets that you can go to where the audience is kind of built in. You're not building an audience so much as you're capturing one, right? Like a lot of you
Yeah.
guys who are in the comments here, I see you in the comments of all the other comic book YouTubers, right? And so it's like you guys know each other, whether I'm making videos or not. And so it's kind of like, all right, well, let me go to where they are and kind of bring them to my little section of it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I had a podcast, you don't really you don't get subscribers on a podcast unless you have crazy word of mouth, or you can go out and get those people. You can advertise to those people. Um, and so, yeah, I've chose YouTube. A lot of YouTube for me, at least this YouTube channel, is about the community, and I think the comic book community is best represented on YouTube versus blogs and other things. So there was the very nerdy and business-like answer to that question. Let's see. Oh, they're talking about Lock and Key still. Lock and
Yeah.
Key sticks the landing, ties the series up beautifully. Sticks the landing is right. Isn't Lock and Key a Netflix show? It is,
It
but
is. It's not as good as the book.
got you.
And yes, I need to get the T-shirt that says the book was better. It's not always my go-to phrase, but there's so many different times where the book just can go into so much more depth than
Mm-hmm.
the TV series can. And this was an example where they wanted to reach a broader audience,
Mm-hmm.
so they made it a little bit more teen level, which is fine. It's a Joe Hill comic. Joe Hill is the son of Stephen King.
Right.
He's the one who wrote it. So it is not kind of intended to be a teeny bopper story. It's meant to be a suspense horror story, or at least have a lot of horror elements that are, drawing you to these pages and some of these graphic events that take place. So definitely read the book.
Nice. So we're about to get into our review of Killadelphia, and I'm really excited about it. One thing that I was going to do was show off the artwork in a very specific way, and I just realized just now that I forgot to export my images that I was gonna show off. So let me go ahead and open up this book digitally so that when I want to read or show off some pages, I can do that. And I really don't need to show off a lot, but
The artwork is unique in Philadelphia.
yeah, the artwork is awesome. The artwork is awesome. And I don't know if you guys can really tell by the background, but I did choose a couple of images from the book. And it's like that all the way throughout. C. Rook says, I don't often comment on other comic channels. This and a podcast I watch are all I really comment on. I'm more active on Reddit. The comic book Reddit is horrible. I honestly, like, I don't do well with like the big text-based platforms. Like I started a Discord because you guys asked me to, and I've been enjoying that. But like Twitter, even Facebook to a certain degree, I'm not like super heavy on. Let's see. Blaine says, I felt the movie of Dark Knight Returns was better than Frank Miller's original writing. That's his opinion. I haven't finished Dark Knight Returns, have I? I don't think I have. I did watch the movies though. So the animated ones.
Love the movies. I haven't finished it yet either. So
gotcha.
I keep going backwards through my Batman run. So and then going forwards. And so I'm through Tom King, I'm through Scott Snyder, through James Tynion, and now I can start going backwards from there.
Got you. So I'm in the middle of Grant Morrison, and I'm doing it the other way. So I'm going forward. So I'm in the middle of Grant Morrison. Then I'm gonna run through Scott Snyder and then Tom King. which is great because Tom King Volume 6 isn't coming out till like next summer. So by the time I get to it, it'll be out in deluxe edition. So that I'm
Yeah.
excited about. And then after that, I'll just start reading all the random like Elseworld. Like I got like Gotham by Gaslight, for example, and some other stuff. But cool. So now we can get into what we all came here for, Killadelphia.
Yeah.
So I wrote down a bunch of stuff. Basically, and in the chat, if you have read Killadelphia, just
Hey, hang on. Let me wake up the dog.
okay.
Hey, that was for having a dream.
She sounded like a person crying. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, that's Greyhound tears. But yeah, she's just having a dream.
She's very. That's a crazy dream.
Half the fun of life. You get to see the dog chaos. Yay!
But yeah, so if you've read Killadelphia in the chat, I don't know if you've got like access to like a blood emoji or something, but give me one of those because those would be fun. Maybe the stream is haunted. Maybe it is, and that's what I get for reading a horror book.
Yeah.
So yeah, Killadelphia. Like I said, I don't do horror books. Like Something's Killing Children, I wasn't interested in. The what is it? The Nice House on
No.
the Lake. I didn't buy. Like there's just a bunch of stuff that I like. Oh, I heard it was a horror book. I don't do horror, but I specifically don't do like supernatural stuff. Like I don't do like the exorcism movies. I don't do like ghosts very much. Like I don't do anything like that. Monsters I'm cool with, and I feel like vampires are just kind of a different type of monster.
Mhm.
So yeah. Thanks, Doc. Is that blood? I don't think so. It just came up as words. It's not a big deal. But yeah, so I got issue 1 of this book in the mystery box, and I think issue 1 kind of perfectly encapsulates what the whole series is about. So I'm going to spoil issue 1 starting right now. So basically, in Killadelphia, we meet JJ Sangster, James Sangster Jr. He's a beat cop from Baltimore who's going back to, or he's living in Baltimore. He goes back to like his native Philadelphia to bury his estranged father. Him and his father did not have the best relationship growing up. And he kind of even opens up the book saying like, yo, like me and my dad were not cool. I'm taking great pleasure in coming to bury him. Now, obviously, his dad was like a revered, I shouldn't say obviously, if you hadn't read the book, you wouldn't know, but his dad was like a revered detective in Philadelphia. So he's known for like solving all the hard cases. He was a homicide cop. And he basically died on the job. And so JJ, as we come to know the James Jr., basically finds his dad's old journal and is like, okay, I'm going to solve the case that you couldn't solve. And his quest to kind of prove himself to the ghost of his father leads him to find some real ghosts or vampires. What I'll say is he just uncovers this entire underworld. And honestly, saying that doesn't really spoil anything if you read the back of the trade. In fact, Laura, do you want to read the back of the trade? So I don't have the trade in front of me.
It says Sins of the Father, featuring the show-stopping talents of Spawn series artist Jason Shawn Alexander and the writer behind such hits as Wu-Tang, An American Saga, Marvel's Runaways, and Star's American Gods, Rodney Burns. When a small-town beat cop comes home to bury his murdered father, revered Philadelphia detective James Sangerson, Sangers Sr., he stumbles into a mystery that will lead him down a path of horrors and shake his belief to their core. The city that once was the symbol of liberty and freedom has fallen prey to corruption, poverty, unemployment, brutality, and vampires. Now it's up to Jimmy and an unexpected companion to stop long thought dead President of the United States, John Adams, from building an undead army and staging a bloody revolution. There's a reason they say you can't go home again. Welcome to Killadelphia.
So yeah, so there is one thing that they did not reveal in that little summary. So I'll try not to reveal it here either. So I've actually written down like who all the main characters are. So I'll kind of go through them, and you can tell the squad here who your favorite characters were. Right. So we've got JJ or Jim Sangster Jr., the beat cop with daddy issues. We've got Jim Sangster Sr., who basically was murdered in issue one. Um, we've got JT Gaskins, who is the mayor of Philadelphia. We've got Jose Padilla, who's the chief medical examiner. Um, we've got Tevin Tompkins, who is like this vampire kid, kind of like I don't know. So if Batman 89 actually had Marlon Wayans as Robin, he'd be Tevin Tompkins, just like the streetwise kid who's got the key to beating the villain. We got John Adams, who is the second president of the United States, and also apparently the leader of this new vampire army that's uprising. Um, and then we've got, actually, I think that's everybody that I need to mention.
Abigail Adams. John
Okay.
Adams is.
Yes. So I wasn't going to mention Abigail because I didn't know if it spoiled anything. But yes, Abigail Adams is John Adams' wife. And then I guess, then we've also got Brittany, who is a child slave who Abigail turns into a vampire way back in the 1800s. Like, yeah. So this book is just awesome. So out of all the characters we've got, who's your favorite? Was it Abigail?
Abigail Adams. So the second one was Jim Sangster Sr.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the fact that yes, the two father and son, there's a natural banter that happens between them, and they write it very realistically. So
Mm-hmm.
they did a great job of kind of getting that frustration between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I found Jim Sr. to just be a little bit funnier. He had that really dry, like kind of guy that will say maybe one sentence, but really hit you between the eyes with what he's trying to say, and it's so funny.
Yeah.
And there is a twist with him in the storyline, and I don't know if we're spoiling that in issue one or not, but there's a twist with him that I really liked. And so then you kind of add that as an extra layer to his character, and I thought it was a lot of fun. But Abigail Adams, in real life, listen, I've always liked her as a historic character. I always liked John Adams, but Abigail Adams just was always kind of a super intelligent, capable woman. And then see her in a vampire story, it was really cool. So one of the reasons I'm like, we have to talk about Abigail Adams.
Got you. So yeah, so like this story, aside from being a horror story, being a vampire story, certainly gets into some historical fiction. And if you got the collected edition, Rodney Barnes talks about how a lot of the story, or a big piece of the story, was inspired by the musical Hamilton. And so because he went and saw Hamilton, he kind of was thinking like, well, John Adams might be like the most underappreciated of the founding fathers. Maybe he should be the subject of my vampire story. So with me, I'm not like the biggest like early American history buff. Like I couldn't tell you what all of the articles of the Constitution are. I might still remember the preamble from middle school, but I'm not like a historian. But I was a little bit too young for Schoolhouse Rock. I saw like the I'm Just a Bill joint because we saw it in class once, but I didn't like grow up watching Schoolhouse Rock. I don't know if it was still on TV when I was watching Static Shock.
Every morning we had to watch the preamble skit from Schoolhouse Rock until we got it memorized. And yes, I still have it memorized, but oh my goodness, we watched that. Oh, sorry.
Wow. No, you're good. So I wanted to hear from you then, because this kind of plays around with history and you have a familiarity with that history. How did the book hit for you in that way?
I thought it was really unique because most of the vampire stories, if we're talking about history, we always go back to Dracula. And we always talk about Vlad the Impaler, or maybe you talk about Elizabeth Ann Bathory. But it's always, kind of a European type of storyline, and you go back to a much, much, much earlier century. So to have this be an American story and kind of vampire origin story was really cool. And I loved the fact that John Adams, feels that in essence, as president, back when he was, that his work is still undone. And that's part of the reason and some of his motivation for, continuing on today. And I did like that idea of, if you could be around for, how many centuries after you were president or you had your famous YouTube channel, what would you want to change? What kind of voice would you want to carry over? What legacy would you want to leave and make sure that it stayed? So I really liked that idea.
Yeah. And, I feel like we can go into his motivations without really spoiling anything. But a lot of what he talks about is just like people like just messed up what we were talking, like when we founded the country. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing now, like the division, whether it's class warfare, race warfare, a lot of it just wasn't supposed to be there. And so he's talking about like kind of rising up a new nation with this tool of immortality that he has from being a vampire. And of course, to do that, you got to turn other people into vampires or everyone into vampires. So I thought that was a really interesting motivation. And yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
other thing I did want to say is I liked that they keep, you got the past history, but then you also have a lot of tie into some of the political divisions that are going on today. Even on the back of the comic, they're talking about the poverty and the issues that are happening, the divisiveness in Philadelphia, and how people feel that their government has ignored them. And I think that's a lot of things that people are fighting today. So to take something that's very relevant and throw it into a vampire story, it's fun, but it also takes a message that, hits multiple generations all in one story.
Absolutely. And I think, and this is kind of a part of a greater organization, but I think that is a huge part of why it's so important to continue having this representation in comic books or having creators from diverse backgrounds, right? So this is written by Rodney Barnes, who is a black man, a big black dude, right? But he's a screenwriter mostly. Like she read on the bio, he does a lot of TV writing. So he did Wu-Tang. Was it American? What was the other thing he's done? American something.
Marvel's Runaways and American Gods.
American Gods. Okay. So yeah, so he's done a lot of like writing for the screen. And when you read this book, you can kind of see it being made into either like an HBO TV series or just a straight up movie. Like I felt like this whole first story arc could have been like a 90-minute movie or more.
Yeah.
And it's definitely set up in a way that it would have plenty of its sequels as well. Now I'll ask you this. Well, before I get off that point, because we have creators from these diverse backgrounds, right? You can tell there is a lot of like modern day politics that makes its way into this book, but not in such a way that it's like, read my political thesis statement.
Exactly.
And I think that was just dope because it offered a perspective of a side of Philadelphia that the average comic writer hasn't been exposed to and wouldn't know to write about. So I thought that was
I really liked that, and I always like it when a writer gives us those unique perspectives and tries showing us, what it's like, whether it's just in your shoes, whether it's as a man, a woman, from different colors, races, backgrounds. I love that. But I thought that he did a really good job of it without making any of us feel like we were being, hit over the head with an agenda. And I think that's a really hard dance to do, even today. And I never felt like this was making me feel ashamed for not being Rodney Barnes, which I definitely like.
Absolutely. So let's see. Dante's Game Room says, oh man, how late am I? Based on the time your comment came in, I would say 45 minutes, but you're all good. You're all good.
Hey,
let's see. Morbius is Blaine's favorite bloodsucker. And Seth with the two-parter says, if you could write any monster book, which type would it be?
Ooh. So before I read Witches, I would have picked Witches because one of my favorite guilty pleasure like Halloween movies, Beyond the Crow, which that's in a whole different category unto its own, is The Craft. Because I love the idea of magic having consequences and how you take that kind of with great power comes great responsibility, idea, and you take it to a slightly different level of what happens when you misuse your power. So I would have said witchcraft, but there's no way I'm going against Scott Snyder, so I'm gonna keep revisiting that one.
So, I mean, the monster stories, I mean, like I said, I don't read a lot of horror. I always have to preface my statements. But the ones I seem to enjoy and gravitate toward the most are like the zombie books. And in this case, the vampires in this story kind of act very similarly to zombies. Um, so that's what I most enjoy. Would I be able to write them as excitingly as, say, like a Tom Taylor does on Deceased? I doubt it. Um, but that'd be the bar to aspire to. Like I love just the aspect of like there's that Netflix movie, The Train to Wuhan or
Yeah.
Train to somewhere, right? But it's
Busan,
say what now?
Busan, Busan, isn't
Busan,
it?
yeah, Wuhan's where the
Yeah.
coronavirus came from, or allegedly. So, but now they're gonna like ban my stream. But the Last Train to Busan was like this zombie book and his or movie, and you don't know who's gonna get bit or when or who they're gonna turn on next. Like it's just such a thriller. Like I love those types of stories. So that's what I would do. Um, Ben is spoiling the book in the chat. So you've read volume one. How much more have you read? Did you read volume two yet of Killadelphia?
For me, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
As soon as I finished volume one, I was dying for volume two, and now I'm waiting impatiently for volume three. There's the spoiler that I've refused to give is there's one thread in volume one that is not resolved that continues through volume two, and it kind of disappears for a while, and then it pops back up at the last second, still unresolved. And now I'm waiting for volume three to see if that's going to resolve that same, storyline. I still enjoy it, but it's creating more questions than answers, which is never a bad thing with a series. I know that there's going to be this kind of final epic conclusion with that particular character.
Okay.
And that's what I'm waiting to find out.
Okay. Cool. Born Hitman says if you're a fan of Scott Snyder and seeing the evolution of vampires in America over long periods of time, you'd likely enjoy American Vampire.
Everyone recommended American Vampire to me when I did the vampires video, and I heard some great reasons why it was recommended, and that's definitely one of them. And yes, it is definitely going to be on my to-do list very soon.
And Trey says, I would love this in a movie or a show.
Definitely.
And if Trey could write a monster book, he'd try a werewolf. So
be fun.
So Trey read this. I guess I have to say, like, this is kind of a preview of our book club next week. As a matter of fact, it's next Thursday, right? Or is it Friday? They move it to Friday?
No, it's Thursday.
Okay, next Thursday we're doing the K Squad book club, and we're going to be talking about Something's Killing the Children, Killadelphia Volume 1, and the last one that I did, Lock and Key Volume 1. So I've read, I will have read 2 out of the 3 when the book club starts. Something's Killing the Children. Oh, so let me say this. I bought this book. I have every single issue of this book, all first print cover A's, and it's still on my pull list now. Did I pull the books out to read them? Of course not, right? And I can look and point at which box they're all in, but instead I was like, you know what? Let me just jump on Comixology. The book was like $3.59, so I bought all of Volume 1, and I'm glad that I did because there are extras in the collected edition that you don't get in the single issues, and being able to see how Jason Sean Alexander puts these images together was a real treat. So I was glad I did that. Now, so I guess we've gone spoiler free enough, right? So let me give a fair warning, put my hands up or whatever. We're getting into spoiler territory. If you have not read Volume 1 of Killadelphia and you care about spoils, or being spoiled, you should probably like, jump off the stream or mute the
It was
stream.
nice to you guys.
But it was great talking to you and having fun with you. I appreciate you being on the Hangout. Now that we've done all that,
Just a really quick, so next Thursday is the hangout with, of course, our book club. But then next Friday is the Kraken's Horde. Scott and I will be on the Kraken's Horde. We are doing a live show and we are doing a fundraiser for our channel, Married with Comics. So the channel that, of course, gave BJ some amazing slabs to unbox recently.
yes.
So there will be slabs, there will be sets, there will be $3 comics, there will be a nice variety, and then, of course, it's going to be Halloween. So we're going to have a ton of fun. Starting at 7 p.m.
Very cool. And Ben says, make sure you like my video on the way out, or like this video on the way out. Yes, do that.
Definitely.
Woo, woo. That's right. I'm excited about book club. I've missed the last 2 book clubs in a row, and I'm trying very hard to make sure I make this one.
I'm excited it's going to be on a Thursday. I always miss the Friday ones, so hopefully we get to stick to Thursday for a little bit.
That'll be dope. And then, all right. So this book, the spoilers, like what? We don't have to like spoil the whole book, but I want to ask you what your favorite part of Volume 1 was. Like, what was your favorite moment in this story?
Okay, so because we're doing spoilers, one of the first things that happens at the very beginning of the story with JJ Senior is he's solving this kind of unsolvable crime. We know that bodies have been showing up all around Philadelphia. At the time, he doesn't know that it's vampires, and he has one of his contacts that tells him to go to this building to meet him, and it turns out that it's a trap, and he is attacked and, of course, passes away. Well, it's not until his son comes to town that he eventually starts piecing together everything and realizes that there are vampires in Philadelphia. And then he realizes that his father is not dead. His father is undead. And there's this amazing moment, and I think it's the last panel of issue number 1, where he's unburying his father and he finally opens up the coffin, and his father's only word to his son is, "It took you long enough."
Yeah.
And that cracked me up.
Yes, that scene, the what took you so long scene, is the reason I bought the rest of the series blind. I was like, I gotta read this, right? Like, so the character of James Senior reminded me so much of my grandfather. My grandfather was Caribbean, and if you know anything about Caribbean Black men, they're very short and quick-witted, right? Like, it's like if you're not careful, you go into a Caribbean house and you just leave with your feelings hurt. Is how that goes. So Jim Senior just reminded me so much of my grandfather, and that dynamic is very, very similar. Like, it's a lot of like Caribbean or kids of Caribbean families kind of grow up with that resentment. But it kind of does get turned around to a certain extent later on in the volume. Like, they share their moment, and it's not like the mushy, "Oh, I always loved you" moment, but there's enough there to imply that's how they feel about each other, which is also very Caribbean dad about the whole situation. Like, it was dope. I love that. And
my grandfather was military, so a lot of that also emulated with me, where he was gruff and very frank, and then he had his moments where he'd ho and hum, and then he would give these little witty, remarks.
mm-hmm.
And it's almost like that Southern, insult you with a smile kind of thing.
Right.
He didn't do the smile very often, but he definitely did the little quips.
Yeah.
James Senior definitely reminded me of that.
Yeah. What took you so long? So good. Yes. And the moment leading, like, I love to be able to tell a story about one situation and then have the what took you so long applied to that situation and the activity that he's doing. Like, I love the way that came through. Like, the way that was scripted was perfect. Now, we can't really talk about this book without talking about the art, right? So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and you guys will get a quick little preview of this art by Jason Sean Alexander. So this is one of the covers to the series for issue number 5. And there's the cover for issue 4. Sheesh, look at that for cover 3 or issue 3. I guess I should have made sure that it's showing up. Yeah, okay, cool. We can all see it. Here's the cover. I think this is who Ben was referring to as a Travis Scott looking kid. Tevin. This is his cover from issue 2. Tevin is probably my second favorite character in the book. Like, I love Tevin's character. And there's a variant for issue 1 and the main cover for issue 1. This is the one I have. But this is James Jr. digging up his father's grave in the cover.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to do some scrolly and try to pick a page that's not going to be too wild.
Dun, 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 dun. Because as a disclaimer for those of you that don't like, you don't mind a vampire story, but you don't like, some of the more graphic Dracula stories that have a lot of sex and violence, this story definitely has plenty of it. So there are sex scenes, there are plenty of kind of, blood splattering violent scenes. It's definitely kind of a true gritty vampire story. So if that is something that you like to avoid, this may not be the best series for you.
Got you. So that is something I was going to ask about later. Like, I was going to ask you if there was anything in the book that was like a deal breaker for you. Like,
no.
Okay.
So like, my official huge deal breaker is when you have violence against women and you have rape. Like, those are, I'm done with the series unless we have like Punisher vigilantism like happening right afterwards. Those are my go-tos. But I didn't have anything in the series that made me, uncomfortable as a woman reading it. I didn't feel that the sex or the violence was put in there as like a show, a Starz, Showtime, HBO sort of thing where you're just trying to get views. I didn't feel like it was misplaced. It definitely went with the storyline. So it's appropriate for where it is. It's just there.
Yeah. So for me, my deal breakers are, for stories like Too Supernatural, like playing with like, demon possession and stuff like that. Like, it's not my thing. But then the other kind of deal breaker for me in any comic is like, sex and nudity. So there is a scene specifically in issue 3 of this book. Now it's literally 2 pages. I will say it does serve the story, right? But when I got to that point in the volume, I was like, oh, did I miscalculate? Like, did I make a mistake pulling this series? And I guess you could speak to whether or not that kind of shows up more and more often, because the way this volume ends kind of leads me to believe there's going to be a lot more of that in volume 2 onward than there was in volume 1. Okay. So
like I said, it's used to establish characters or to show some of the relationships that have happened. And it's happening within the humans and the vampires. So you do have those scenes happening on both sides, but again, it is being used kind of, it's not properly, but it's not just for shock value, but it is definitely going to stay prominent.
Yeah. So what I'll say is what I read, right? And like when that scene popped up in the book, I was like, oh, this is kind of the line for me. But as I continued to read it, I was like, okay, well, for one, it made sense, right? Basically, the scene in issue 3 serves to establish who Abigail is and kind of how her views of the world and how it should work differ from John Adams's. And so toward the end of this volume, I guess I did say we're just going to fully spoil, but John Adams is no more by the end of this book. And so it's pretty clear that Abigail is going to pick up the reins and be the main antagonist in volume 2 and, moving forward. So because of that, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and I think the other reason that they do it, because if you're gonna toss that in there, I'll at least finish the thought, is that some of the sex, of course, does involve Abigail Adams, those scenes. But I think in some ways it's their way of differentiating John Adams and Abigail Adams' approach to what they want to do as vampires. Because John Adams is always kind of looking back at his original legacy and what he can do today to make him, stand stronger, make what they intended originally, stick.
Yeah.
And Abigail Adams, on the other hand, is more forward thinking. So I think in some ways that's why she's not showing any sexual apprehensions. She's kind of experiencing the vampire life, and that's part of the reason they did it that way.
Got you. Yeah, like what I got from the story was obviously John Adams has his one view of how to kind of get everyone back on the same page and stuff like that. Where Abigail apparently wants to raise an army of vampires for, we'll just say, different reasons. And I'm sure that'll be fleshed out more in the later volumes, like, just why they had their differences. And one of the things that is said in the book is like, the poor people, the lower class people, they wanted the immortality because they wanted to kind of be saved from the lifestyles they were in. But the more wealthy people, the people who were well off, they needed other things to convince them. And so that kind of, allure of the whole sexual lifestyle is what kind of did them in. It all serves to like just kind of make the big army of vampires, but it's just that's kind of how Abigail appealed to that class. And maybe that was just appealing to her. We got a comment from Trey. Says sex and hedonistic views are a big part of the vampire lore in many stories. I don't think they overdid it. It didn't feel overdone in volume 1 to me. It's just not something that like I'm big on. It's kind of a sensitive line for me. So if you're like me, that might be a deal breaker for you. But I think the story stands up well enough. Like it's not like Vampirella, for example, where I was like trying to find reasons to justify continuing to read, but it's
And
still.
is it Dracula? There's Dracula 2000, which was way over the top, and then I want to say it's the Keanu Reeves Dracula movie, where both of those like everything's an orgasmic experience, and it's kind of intentionally really over the top in some ways, especially Dracula 2000. But I didn't feel like it went to those levels. I felt like it was trying to point out some things about the characters, but like I said, that you definitely have more of that happening, specifically with Abigail Adams in Volume 2. I don't know if it's going to continue in Volume 3, but the thing that, segue away from the sex and the violence is, we talked a little bit about Rodney Barnes doing a great job of almost writing this like a film. So one of the things that I really enjoyed is he takes almost like a break from the main storyline, and then he will give a backstory for some of the, whether it's the main character or some of the side characters.
Gotcha.
And he does that really prominently in Volume 2 and in Volume 1, where it's these great moments. So then when you see everyone kind of coming together, you then care a little bit more instead of always seeing just the main storyline. That I really, really liked.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a moment with Brittany that I really liked in Volume 1, where that's because Brittany kind of shows up earlier in the story as someone who kind of leads this police officer, or I don't know, was he an officer? He was just somebody that like shouldn't have been on that side of town. But basically, like there's a guy who tries to solicit her services, but she's like a little girl. And she kind of like catches him like, yeah, like I see where your intentions were, and your punishment is, we're going to come and like turn you into a vampire and so on. Right. But later on, we learn that Brittany is not just a little girl from Philadelphia. Brittany has been a vampire for like 150 years since slavery times. And she's got an older sister, and they've been kind of going through life together for all these years. The older sister is remorseful and like doesn't want to be a vampire anymore, finds a way to make that happen. And so there's like this tension between the two of them because Brittany is like, nah, like I still want to be immortal, but I also want my sister. And so that was something interesting that I would love to see where that story goes. Like, I don't know. I might just kind of just be out of it though if volume two is getting, a little bit more graphic, or I should say graphic.
It gets more graphic, but then it's also, listen, you get more of the other characters. You see more of the sisters, you see more of some of the other side characters, and then you get some of the politics of the Abigail Adams kind of vision versus the John Adams vision, and then of course Tevin, comes into play. So it's really interesting because, like you were saying before, where you have sort of these well-to-do people who have become vampires and sort of have this image of immortality and wealth and maintaining their social status. And then you had the people of Philadelphia who just didn't want to starve to death, and that became vampires to survive. And now they're looking at it going, well, could we make this a better place for everyone instead of just the well-to-do? So there's a lot of really cool themes that are definitely being expanded in volume 2, and those are some of the things I can't wait for in volume 3.
Got you. So I feel like we can't talk about that aspect of the story without giving a quick shout out to my homie Tevin. So I'm trying to pull up a page real quick. So by all means, continue talking. Let's see. I really should buy a second monitor for these things.
So Tevin, of course, as BJ's pulling this up, like I said, you kind of have these different perspectives. So you have, James Sr., you have James Jr., and that kind of back and forth. Then you have John Adams, that is always looking backwards. You have Abigail Adams, that is looking forwards. And then you have Tevin. And Tevin is this streetwise guy who, has that very intriguing balance of the power of being a vampire, but then also understands what it's like to be in the streets of Philadelphia, but then is also not willing to be manipulated by anyone in this situation. So Tevin is this incredible character that I'm so glad they put in this story.
Yeah. So like Tevin is kind of showcased as like the key to this whole thing in volume 1. I don't know how much that continues, but there's one part of the story where John Adams basically like makes Tevin the keeper of like this mystical book that no one's been able to figure out. I would compare it to the Book of Eli, but I've never actually watched all of the Book of Eli. But it's this book that it's clearly precious to people. And John Adams has been trying to decipher it. He couldn't decipher it, but Tevin was able to decipher it. And kind of uses that to his advantage later on in volume 1. But Tevin also has a really close relationship with his grandmother. And his grandmother, he did not turn her into a vampire. He didn't want to do it against her will. So she ends up dying. And he's just kind of taking the lessons that he learned from his grandmother, and using that kind of sees through all the BS that John is trying to feed him. Basically his vision for the world versus how the world actually is. And because of that, he kind of revolts against John Adams and kind of joins our crew of protagonists. So I really, really liked that. And Ben is saying it right here. I love that Roddy Barnes empowers Tevin in a way that most stories mostly ever give to like the bookish white characters. Yeah, there's always like the nerdy kid that like knows what to do and so on. It's never some streetwise kid. And it's certainly not usually like the black kid. Like this, Tevin is clearly the guy that you underestimate because of who he is and where he comes from. And so I love that the key to solving all of this is with Tevin for the time being.
And that is the storyline that in volume 2 doesn't get resolved yet, unless that's the part in volume 3 that I think is everything's going to come to a head. So that's kind of the moment that I'm dying for, is kind of whether it's the confrontation between him and Abigail Adams, or to see what what his big plan is, because someone like that is thinking 3 steps ahead. And
Right.
so I love that he's in there, but then I'm also really curious what he's going to do, because if you have a book with that much power, and he's not interested in just using it for himself. So I can't wait to see what's going to become of Killadelphia.
Word. And yeah, I could imagine, based on how Abigail is presented in volume one, that she's going to be quite the formidable opponent whenever that confrontation happens. And I think that's dope as well. Like, there's not just like, the black kid being empowered, but Abigail really is like a strong female character,
Yeah.
even if she is the antagonist, right? I think that's still dope.
Yeah.
Nick Goltra said he just followed you on Instagram, so thanks for the hangout.
Thank you.
Nice, nice. So I guess we can get into kind of like our final thoughts. Like, if you had to rate this based on the story, what would you rate the story?
So for me, my challenge is that like volume one was really good, but I immediately had to kind of fly to volume two. So if I was only looking at volume one, I'd give it like a solid 7 out of 10. Like,
Okay.
there's so much great there, but part of why it's not like closer to a 10 out of 10 is because I want to see what's going to happen with the rest of the storylines. I want to see what's going to happen with Abigail Adams and Tevin and all these other characters.
Mm-hmm.
And even still after volume two, I have a couple more answers, but then I still have more questions. So I almost want to wait until I'm done with the whole series and then give a different number,
Mm-hmm.
because I think in some ways the ending is going to be just as important as the beginning.
Got you. Yeah, I would give it, and my rating scale is so weird, right? Like, a 10 is like a perfect book. A 9 is like the best thing I read in a given week, and an 8 is just a really good book. A seven is like a good book that clearly had like its weak points. And for me, I give this like a solid 8 to a 9, just depending on when I read it. I really, really enjoyed the book. It kept me interested all the way throughout. Like, all throughout the first volume, I felt like it did not take a break.
No.
There were no panels off. Like I said, the moments are so well scripted. Like, it really felt like I was watching like a TV movie. And so I liked it a lot. Yeah, I would definitely give it a solid 8, maybe even 8.5. Really, I felt like it wrapped up nicely enough. Like, I want to know what happens with all these characters, right? But even if I decide not to continue because of the other reservations I have, I felt like volume one gave me enough of a resolve to the threads that it opened up, right? Like, if John Adams was the big bad, the fact that he goes down in volume one, it's like, okay, cool. That's a nice jumping off point if all I was interested in was that. But like you said, there are other plot threads that are opened up, right? Like, when are we going to see Tevin use his magic again, right? Like, how powerful is he really? What's going on with Brittany and her sister, right? How does Sanger deal with, because it's hinted at a lot that Sanger Senior or Sangster, Sangster Senior might end up like kind of turning, because he's got this thirst for blood. He doesn't always have blood available, right? Like, there's a lot of things that are kind of teased that I'm like, I could see this going somewhere in future issues. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But there's definitely a lot in this series to kind of, or in this volume, to get you excited about the continuation.
Yeah. And I think, listen, and that's, I think, part of why I'm leaning towards the 7, but listen, I think that it still has so much potential to get easily to an 8. Is anything that gets me reading, through and excited for the second volume always kind of ranks a little bit higher for me. It's just, I think I need volume 3. I'm like, I need just a little bit more, and then I'll know the direction that they're heading in. Just because there were some really cool things that they did in volume 2, but then they also are starting this storyline, or at least continuing it from volume 1 with Tevin. And because Tevin's also one of my favorites, I'm like, I want to see where they're heading with this, because I can't tell if they're heading in a very supernatural direction because of the magic and because of this magical book, or are they sticking with more the vampire, the murders, or is it more the social political, storyline? So I can't tell if they're trying to do all three in one story, or if they're trying to focus in on one of those three and make that the conclusion of the story.
Gotcha.
So that I'm waiting for.
So my strong 8 is based on volume 1 alone, but your 7 is based on volume 1 and 2 together. Got you. Trey said, I rated this story 8 out of 10. I'm ready for volume 2. The Born Hitman asked a question. He says, do you think Killadelphia could expand into its own universe with other types of creatures like werewolves or Frankenstein?
I think so. So one of the people up on, was it either YouTube or it was Instagram, saw your ad for today's YouTube channel and mentioned that there's a spin-off series that was released yesterday.
Yes.
And that
Nita Hall's Nightmare Blog.
Yeah, and it's starting a new, spin-off, new series, but it's still staying within the realm of vampires.
Gotcha.
It is definitely possible within this that we could have other monsters like werewolves, demons, other things, witches. But of course, they haven't started that yet. I think they're trying to see how the expansion of the universe goes so far.
Right.
But they're trying it.
Yeah. This story so far is very much local to Philadelphia. But if you have the power to raise up an army, you're not going to raise them from just one city. So I'd be curious to have it expand and see how widespread is this, and how does it affect the politics of the nation and not just, the Philadelphia mayor's office, for example. That'd be interesting, but I don't know about different types of creatures. Ben says, I'm with Laura. I do think the series gets a little weaker in arc 2. 7 out of 10 seems right, which can get higher if they bring it back together in the third arc.
Thank you.
Dope. Night of Fun on TikTok. Without any spoilers, volume 2 of the paperback has a bonus story for another type of monster in the same world. Now she's trying to remember which.
Go back and check out that bonus story. I'm trying to remember what it is.
So yeah. So we've rated the story. For me, the art is like a solid 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Like it's awesome. And like I said, there's a feature in the back. And you know what? I'll show it to you guys at risk of like just pirating the whole book. Right. But there's a feature in the back where Jason Sean Alexander kind of details the process of how his shoots or his scenes come together. So let's see where we at.
There's a level of grit to it that, we're not talking jock level. We're not talking, there was a Penny Dreadful comic that Scott had read recently where it felt like someone had taken the art and then put like black squibbles kind of on top of it. It doesn't feel like that. This is just, I think because they're trying to give the grit of Philadelphia, there's just something about this particular art form that's it's very cool. And it's very, it's unique, but I really enjoyed it.
Got you. So yeah, so what Jason Alexander does is a lot of kind of like what Alex Ross does, where he poses models in these poses and takes the pictures and he photographs them himself. And then he goes to the pencil and kind of makes those scenes come alive. And so there's a lot of scenes where it just looks super realistic, but still gritty, still like it's still stylized, clearly. But I really love this approach. I love seeing how artists make things happen. Like, that's just always dope to me. So if you haven't read this already, definitely grab the collected edition because of the extras in the back. Like that's really why I'm like, grab that.
I don't know which page it's on because otherwise I'd tell you in the book, but there's this one image that kind of continues on and it's basically showing the history and kind of evolution of John Adams. Yeah. And you see, the history, the big events that are happening within each one of these kind of little slides.
Right.
And this is one of my absolute favorites because you kind of have the introduction of different technologies. So you have the first Ford, vehicle. You have President Obama. You have all these different huge events that take place, and then of course you see his clothing change. But all he's doing is walking, and it's
Right.
another one of those examples where this one little 2-page panel just hits home. I love it.
And that's in volume 3. Give me a second. I'll pull it up. Or issue 3,
That
excuse me.
issue, yeah,
Because issue 3, I actually wrote down like, yeah, we get, so in issue 1, yeah,
yeah,
JJ starts to finds out his dad's a vampire. Issue 2, we get the conspiracy explained and John Adams shows up. And then issue 3 is like how John became the villain, the big bad of this story. So
yeah.
let's share the screen again. And I'm gonna show you guys this stream, and I promise we're gonna wrap up. But this
That's
is the
yeah.
stream that Laura's talking about, and
I just
it's awesome.
I absolutely loved it because, and I agree with you. 10 out of 10 for the artwork because it manages to kind of build a unique story because you immediately feel like you're being transformed into something different. So you feel a sense of familiarity, but then you also know that it's something different, something gritty. You know something is just a little scarier in this world of Killadelphia. So
Mhm.
when you get images like this, where absolutely, I mean, this is just a great kind of historical picture, but you need that image and to see and kind of go down your own little rabbit trail of, okay, if you were John Adams and you saw all these different events take place, how would it shape what you're doing today? So I love this.
Yo, I did not notice that, Trey. Trey says, look at the time on the clock. It's 9:11.
I didn't even notice that either, Trey.
That's crazy. But yeah, I love the artwork. What's funny is like I know Jason Sean Alexander before this, he was doing Spawn. And when I picked up Spawn around issue 300, I remember not being able to get into the art like that. I didn't like it as much. But for this story, it's the same style basically, but it works so well in this story. And perhaps it works well for Spawn. Spawn's got demons and supernatural stuff in it too. But I just felt like, oh wait, this is the yeah, this is I was heading into a very wrong place. But
Yeah, don't go too far on issue 30.
right. I just felt like it really matched the vibe of the story, like keeping it dark, keeping you guessing. It just looked awesome. It was great. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and take the art off the screen because I'd be the one to go to the wrong page by mistake. Um, but yeah, so that was our review of Killadelphia, right? So I'm giving it a solid 8 for the story, a solid 10 for the art. So I guess that kind of makes it a 9 by default. Um, so did you have any like final thoughts?
Also, it was a lot of fun. It was very unique. It was a great modern vampire story. And I should say it has a ton of potential, but as always, listen, I'm kind of waiting for volume 3 to see which direction they take. But so far, it was a great beginning. Volume 1 was a very solid start to the series.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I have all the books still. So I'm still going back and forth, like, am I gonna read it? I'll probably like to kind of thumb through and see like how bad it gets. I may honestly drop off at volume 1 though. And maybe I'll pick it up in a later volume, see how it goes or whatever. I might just skip certain stories. But I liked it a lot. I liked what I read a lot. Issue 1 really captured me. I don't think I've had an issue 1 capture me like that since. And I didn't regret reading it at all. I really, really enjoyed the story. So if Rodney Barnes and Jason Sean Alexander are watching, great job. I give it 2 thumbs up. So before we go ahead and shout out your channel and anything you got going on once again.
Absolutely. So, Married with Comics, right now we are in the middle of our 31 comics of Halloween. So, we have already covered vampires, demons, ghosts, and zombies. So, we have plenty of other categories that are coming up. And then, of course, I have one special episode that will be dedicated to The Crow. talking about the comic book versus the Brandon Lee epic movie that I absolutely love. So we will kind of wrap up Halloween, but in the meantime, obviously next Thursday on the Hangout, we're doing our book reviews of some great series. And then on Friday, so it is the 29th of October at 7 p.m. on the Kraken's Horde live on Facebook. We are going to do a fundraiser for the channel, Married with Comics, and then, of course, afterwards, we're going to help the Kraken's Horde list some great titles. So we will have sets and $3 comics and, slabs and a whole variety of, and of course, graphic novels as well. So we'll have a variety of different titles that'll be available, and it's going to be a ton of fun. It's going to be a Halloween theme, and if you have any questions, of course, for us, we will answer it while we put up some comic books.
Nice. Very cool. So yeah, as far as me, the hangout next week, like she said, is going to be the book club meeting. We're going to talk about Killadelphia, Something's Killing the Children, and Lock and Key. So if you're a horror fan or a spooky fan or whatever you want to call that, that's going to be the night for you. I don't read a ton of horror books, so if you want the horror stuff, definitely go to Married with Comics for the Halloween month. There's a lot of really cool reviews going on there. Beyond that, I got some really exciting stuff in the works, but I can't really talk about it. I do want to say mark your calendars. On the November 11th episode of The Hangout, that is going to be our 1-year anniversary show. So there's going to be some giveaways, and that's where I'm going to make some really, really exciting announcements. So you definitely want to mark your calendar. You got a good 3 weeks to get your affairs in order so that you can make the stream. But that's all I got going on. I hope you enjoyed our review of Killadelphia. If Killadelphia was not the story for you, that's cool. Because you know what I say, right? You can always buy what you like. Just make sure you read what you buy, right? And what's the rest of it, Laura? You got it?
And be kind to others, because kindness makes the world go round. Hang on. Because kindness makes people happy. Kindness. Oh, come on. You're going to leave me hanging on this. Oh, come on.
No, it's be nice to others, because kindness makes the world go round.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Woo. Sorry. I'm like, please don't tell me I messed that one up. But we will definitely do another comic book review down the road.
Absolutely.
Hopefully before next Halloween.
Right. Thank you guys for joining. He's talking about the Unveil Nike sponsorship. I wish. But yeah, thank you guys for being here, and we will see you next time. Peace.